I live in at Parsons Cross with my mum. It's one of the biggest housing estates in Europe.
I live with other people.
It is a nice house. Very nice.
I live independently. I moved into my flat straight after boarding school. So really, I left down when I was 13 really. So.
I live with my mum and dad. It's very nice.
I've been living with my mum now for 10 years. I got my own bedroom. I love it, it's a quiet road. My neighbours are nice. I can go to the shops by myself.
I live with my dad. It's very nice house. I've got a CD player in my bedroom.
Supporters live in United Response. Support workers on standby. I wouldn't like to be institutionalised because I've seen it and I don't like what I see there.
I used to work at Middlewood Hospital. I was employed as a craft instructor. I had never worked anywhere like that before, so it was, when I started it was a huge shock. I had no idea what I was actually getting into. The first group I was given was about 25 people sitting in lines, and they were doing various bits of knitting and sewing and stuff, quite basic stuff. And it wasn't until I'd been doing it for quite a few weeks that I discovered that the old ladies at the back were knitting this horrible kind of thick nylon stuff on thick needles, and they sort of knit to the end of the ball, take it off the needles, unravel it all and start again. Then I thought, well, this is not therapy, you know, this is not therapy at all.
I'd been a volunteer at a psychiatric unit in Lincoln. It was called The Lawn. I was 17 perhaps. I didn't see any abuse, I didn't experience any harshness. When I then went for 6 months to Balderton Hospital near Newark, this was 1967. That was jaw-dropping for me. I mean, I was completely surrounded by a world of people who were completely different, from very severe cases where children were in cots, contained in cots because they were self-harming. Some of them were up to 4 years old. But the self-harming could have been, I now realise, as an experienced adult, from boredom.
Not very nice. Just being in hospital all the time when I was a little baby.
I was lucky to survive when we were born. I had meningitis, and I think that's probably the reason I got disabilities and that.
Got a teaching job in Liverpool at a school. It was called Longmoor Special School. At the time, the care of education for mentally handicapped children was under the auspices of the Ministry of Health rather than education. It was about to change, I think, in 1970. It meant there was more educational structure, that there were aims to progress to, that you did lesson plans as a teacher would, you did individual assessments for children, rather than daily sessions, daily activities without a particular aim or objective in an educational sense.
School, I went to a special school called Athelstane in Conisborough.
I went to Whitby Road School, at school, and then eventually we had a few problems with bullying. I was sent to Reigate for a test. I was found to have a learning disability, a grip and coordination problem.
I went to normal mainstream schools till about 13, to Aberdeen School, which I didn't stay on too long because the support was terrible. I was in class, not understanding what I need to do. So gone to the headmaster, because Mum came and picked me up and never went back to school.
Not nice.
School never rugby. Overton school a long time ago. I was standing in the corner. Yeah. Been naughty boy. Yeah. Tom made me up properly.
School got beaten up loads of times at school.
And what about school? Did you go to school?
Talbot School. Went swimming. We played ball.
I went to Mainbridge, and then I was homeschooled, and then I went to a place called Shirle. And then I went to Base Green. And then I went to Loxley College. After college, I started going to day services.
I actually went to boarding school in Maclock, a speech and language school. It was a really good school, but I felt I was held back a bit.
It was only really in the 19th century that people started to conceptualise learning disability in the way in which they do now, or something resembling that form. Before the invention of mass education in the 1870s, people were obviously not learning to read and learning to write, or the working classes weren't to a large degree. And that meant that fewer people were picked up as having a learning disability. From about the end of the 19th century, there was much more interest in learning disability and that as a category, and it was called feeble-mindedness, which is obviously quite a distressing word to use now. That was a whole category that picked up a lot of people who were deemed not to fit in society. So, for example, it included mothers of illegitimate children. So people that weren't considered to be productive members of society were ostracised. What constituted disability was someone deemed not able to work or not able to support themselves.
Up till about 100 years ago, really, the apprentice system was the way that weavers got labour and young people learned to trade, which was their sort of education from about the age of sort of 9 or 10 onwards. Their family used to organise like a placement, and they bound the child to be living away from home with the weaver, the master weaver, who would teach them the trade over a period of 7 years.
This sort of goes back to pre-industrial revolution and is present in our society to a lesser extent these days.
My family's been in cutlery, had a factory for about 3 generations. The industry used to follow the apprenticeship model. The schools and things don't really have a sort of a metalwork and woodwork curriculum anymore. You know, students who probably have problems with reading, writing, arithmetic. You don't really need any of these sort of academic skills to work in a place like this, but you do need concentration, you need to be very dexterous with your hands and fingers and things like that. And these are things that aren't measured really on an academic scale at all. Nowadays, if we were employing someone who could probably take our pick of people with degrees, I suppose, now to work in a place like this.
Part of what disability is someone who's deemed not to fit in society in a particular kind of way. So there's no inherent thing that is disability, but it's a process by which some people are marked out as different to others. Everybody is different and we all have different abilities and capacities, but only some of those are marked out to be disabled. At the end of the 19th century, you get this crisis where people perceive that there's more and more learning disability, and they see it as a growing problem. They believe that people with learning disabilities are actually more reproductive than people without learning disabilities. So they believe that the population is going to be, in their words, taken over by people with learning disabilities, and this is considered to be quite frightening. So between 1904 and 1908, you get the Royal Commission into the care and control of the feeble-minded. It's about trying to put limits on people with learning disabilities and trying to contain their place within society. So one of the outputs of the Royal Commission into the care and control of the feeble-minded was the Mental Deficiency Bill, then it became an Act in 1913, and that actually stipulated that everybody with a learning disability should be institutionalised. And the main reason for that was because they were worried about people with learning disabilities having children. And so it was a measure a bit short of sterilisation, but that was very much to do with containing people and controlling people. And so the segregation of people with learning disabilities became very entrenched by the state. And then over the course of the 20th century, you got a kind of turnaround from that kind of thinking, where people started to question institutions, question whether it was right for the people with learning disabilities who were in them, whether it was best for society as a whole. And you gradually get this move towards what's called care in the community, with people living independently.
When the hospitals started to close, at that point we realised that maybe craft work wasn't the most important thing that they needed to know about, because it felt like they were very ill-equipped to go out into the big world. A lot of people couldn't sign their names if they needed to sign a cheque or fill in a form or that kind of thing. So I started doing quite a lot of basic education. I was working with a guy who was about to be sent out into the community, and the package that they put together for him seemed to me totally inadequate. I mean, some moved out into smaller residential homes, some of which I visited and didn't like at all. A lot of the original institutionalised staff went with the patients to these smaller residential places, and you just thought, well, you know, is anything going to improve as a result of closing it down, really? And some were going to be going to live by themselves, you know, in council flats and stuff, and had no idea about, you know, paying rent and organising their finances and things like that. By the time I left, I was actually working, going out into the community with the people who were moving out, and trying to make sure that they knew where the nearest chip shop was, that they knew how to boil an egg, that they knew how to, you know, open a tin of beans, and so that they could, you know, have at least some kind of subsistence living when they moved out. But I wasn't happy at all, and you know, and yet, you know, where they were coming from was a very big institutionalised place, but a place that some of the patients looked back on with quite a lot of affection. It was sort of feeling safe in a way. Alternative didn't feel comfortable and didn't feel safe.
History made me wonder how good it is now being a disabled person to when it was back years ago.
Yeah, I think I'm very lucky to be born now.
But I thought to myself, if we have lived in bygone times, I wouldn't have been here.
I think the time I was born was kind of bang in the middle of the time when education was quite good and there was money to support me and stuff, but now it's all that's fading away, so.
Again, we're seeing cutbacks to public funds, which is actually limiting some of the opportunities that people have got for independent living.
There's stuff around, but it's not always very easy to actually get involved in it, or you can't afford it, or staff can't get you there, or, you know, that kind of thing.
I think today there's a huge tendency to put people in boxes, a condition in a box. Oh yes, he's autistic. Oh yes, she's Down syndrome. Deal with the ability or disability in that way. In education, the push is to tick boxes, and people have labels.
Make the most of your life. try and get more out of it, because you don't know what's round the corner. So we don't ask to be born with disabilities.